Hello, welcome. If you could please state your name, who you represent, and your position on the bill, and we'll start the 1-minute timer. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Dr. Cortez and the committee for your time. My name is Crystal Moya. I'm here representing the Texas Apartment Association in opposition of House Bill 886. My company, Vesta Management, currently has approximately 4,000 units across the state of Texas, which currently participates in the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, which many know as the Tax Credit Program. Of those, 35% of our units are currently housed by voucher recipients. That's well over 1,300 families. Even though we support the voucher program strongly, there are many barriers or administrative burdens created by the program, which, in essence, make it difficult for other landlords to participate. One, and most importantly, as a landlord across 12 different regions, we deal with 12 different housing authorities, and they all kind of deal with the program a little differently. They all manage it a little differently. Our benefit is that we have staff that is trained to be able to deal with the compliance regulations that come with the voucher program. Secondly, the vouchers often don't pay enough to and therefore create a financial burden for a lot of landlords. And with the ever-increasing insurance premiums and real estate tax responsibilities, this is creating stressful situations. Additionally, parameters are not ideal with the program, such as several delays in payments, delays in housing, and labor-intensive physical inspections. I want to give you a real-life example. If I have a resident that comes into one of my properties today, it can take easily 30 days before I can occupy my unit. So yes, there is a vacancy loss that nobody is covering for me. Additionally, once the family is in, if everything is perfect and great, there's another 60 to 90 days before I obtain my funds from the housing authority, and this could go on more. Ultimately, there are several reasons why I don't agree with this bill, but most importantly, I welcome any questions, and I respectfully oppose House Bill 886.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, any questions for this witness? Representative Gates?
Okay, there are national lenders that won't loan on a property if you're forced to take vouchers. And are you aware that there's also, you mentioned insurance, and I forgot about that. There's also insurance companies that will not give you insurance if you take Section 8 or vouchers. Are you aware of that?
I am aware that there could be an increase in insurance premiums as a result.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Just want to understand a little bit more about the timetable. So there's a 30-day window where you have a unit that's not occupied, so that's income you don't get. Then if everything goes well with the applicant family, they move in to the unit, but there could be 2 or 3 months where before you get your first voucher.
Okay.
And then at that time, the value of the voucher you get is for what period of time?
They're usually for 12 months.
So you wait 3, but then you get a voucher for 12, and I guess you back end the first 3, and then you're sort of guaranteed the remaining 9. I guess I'm wondering if the lack of security on the first 3 is sort of made up for by the guarantee of the remaining 9. In other words, that's guaranteed paid rent as opposed to sort of wondering if someone's going to come up with rent on a regular basis.
Right. And you make a great point with that. However, we have to keep in mind that our mortgage companies don't wait 60 to 90 more days for us to make payment. Our insurance companies don't wait. Our responsibility to maintain units doesn't wait. This is a constant daily thing that we need to continue to operate our communities. There is no delay for that. We have to continue to operate, and as a result, we expect continuous payment. And when we're having to wait 60 to 90 days even for a guaranteed payment, it's still burdensome for any landowner, especially for the landowners that own small properties and rely on these small properties as their main source of income. You have a community of 10, 20 properties, and you're required to accept vouchers on these, and you don't get payment for 60 to 90 days. These situations can force people into bankruptcy, into foreclosure. We don't want to add to the domino effect that this can cause, which will ultimately create barriers for us to be able to provide more affordable housing.
Yeah, let me ask one more question. I appreciate you explaining it to me. After the first 30 days, and once you're into that 60 to 90 day window when you know the voucher's coming, You is it certain the voucher's coming, or is it still a sort of honeymoon period before? And I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, if it's guaranteed and you know it versus is it still remain to be seen, and then you find out that you're going to get it on the 90th day, the 60th day.
All right. So the first period, which is the 30 days, includes the process of the applicant coming into the property saying, I want to rent an apartment. I have a voucher. Typically, the manager will say, okay, how much is the voucher? Right now, I can honestly tell you, most of our vouchers are not paying what ideally we would be getting in an open market. But once that is done, we begin our screening process and we prepare all the documentation that's required through the RTA, which is very burdensome, tons of documentation that we have to send to the Housing Authority. Housing Authority then has to review the application packet for that resident. For the applicant. If everything is good, then they inform the inspector. The inspector then takes another 3 to 4 days to contact the property manager to schedule an inspection. The inspection there then takes another 2 to 7 days before they can even make it out to the property. This has been doubled since the start of the pandemic because everybody's working remotely. Nobody can really walk into units and whatnot. So it's been a burden and it's been duplicated since the pandemic. But yes, typically what we lose are the first 30 days. No one pays that economic loss. No one covers that. Once we get an approval, then we're guaranteed payment. But aside from that, we're not guaranteed payment until they say this applicant has been approved.
And just so I'm clear, your testimony is that the guaranteed 12 months of rent is sort of insufficient to offset the sort of delayed payment of, well, I guess the non-payment of 30 days and the delayed payment of the 60 to 90.
Well, you have to take into consideration the vacancy loss that you just incurred that will never be recovered.
Right.
No one can help you recover that. Secondly, it's guaranteed with conditions that unit is always up to the housing quality standards. And as landlords, yes, we do have an obligation to maintain our units in quality conditions, but many times it's on the resident's responsibility to maintain the housekeeping. And many times we find the biggest problems on the tenant side. Unfortunately, and many of our units get abated at that point. Even it could be as soon as 3 months into the lease. If that unit gets abated, we're not getting money anymore for that unit. We won't until that unit is back into compliance. And a lot of times that responsibility falls back on the resident, and not many are willing to work with us.
I understand. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative.
Chair.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get the whole let's keep government out of our business kind of deal, and insurance and banks and all that other stuff. But is your insurance in jeopardy or your bank loan in jeopardy if you accept money from the Texas Rent Relief Program?
No, sir. To answer your question, no. But
Sounds like it's still a voucher, but you'll take the money, but you're not going to look at the people a little different. In respect to your loan, when you first get your loan, do you have to pay your entire loan, or you're just paying down on the draw?
we're paying down on the loan,
You're paying down on the draw or the
Right.
entire loan?
on the entire loan.
When you first get a loan, you need to get a new bank. I've never seen that. Even when you build a house, you can still pay down on the draw and not the entire amount, because you're still giving a leeway because you haven't
That-
started your rents yet.
that
So
is
how is the bank asking
you are
for
correct.
the entire amount when you're not even?
You are
So they're only allowing you to pay down on the draw.
Correct.
So that bank is giving you that leeway as you're getting yourself prepared to start accepting the rents. Am I correct? So you said yes.
That is correct.
So at the end of the day, isn't that the same thing we're talking about with these vouchers? So as we're getting the process in order, it may take, and I'm a businessman, I own daycare centers, and so at the end of the day, every time I take neighborhood centers, it takes 60 days.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that I was always reassured of is the fact that it was going to be paid.
Mhm.
It was going to be paid for the amount of money that from the first time that kid came into my daycare center until the last day that kid left, or for that month. I shouldn't even say for that last day, for the month.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount that I put in place, and of course I'm just trying to make the analogy, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but my fee was my fee.
Right.
I wasn't going to change my fee so I got paid my fee. That's the same situation with this housing.
Not necessarily, because
Okay.
you have to remember, because your analogy stated that as soon as someone walks into whatever business XYZ, you're guaranteed that money. That's not necessarily the case in our situation. When the resident steps into our property asking for a unit and they state they have a voucher, we're not paid from that first day. We don't get paid until that contract is signed between ourselves, the landlord, and the housing authority and the tenant. So
For the most part,
if
when
it
they
takes
move in,
Correct. That's pretty much when they move in. So if it takes a housing authority 2 or 3 additional weeks on top of what it takes us to approve the file, just to get an approval, then we're lost all that money and no one's going to recover that money for us.
if I go to your apartment complex and ask for an application, my rent starts then, even
No.
before I move in.
No, it does not. It starts when you move in. And I see the point that you're trying to make. But you see, we have to pull that unit offline, because if you come into my property and you say, I want a 2-bedroom unit, I have a voucher, great. I have to pull that unit offline. In other words, I cannot offer it to anybody else that comes into my property. When somebody else without a voucher, I can approve sometimes within 2 or 3 days. So thereby, I don't have so much vacancy loss. But with someone with a voucher, I'm required to go through the documentation. I'm required to go through the inspection process and whatnot. And that's what becomes cumbersome. That's where our vacancy loss comes in.
Aren't there days by which, when someone moves out from one of your units to the time that someone moves in? I just heard one of the gentlemen say he wasn't a good tenant when he was 20, and so it took you some time to repaint the walls, strip the carpet. So there may have been a couple of weeks in there in which you were trying to get your unit back together before someone else was able to move in. Isn't that the same time? You're still lost that time from one tenant to the next. There's that 2-week period that's on you. You were trying to get that unit together. Do you charge that to the tenant, or is that to your cost?
It depends. If the tenant broke their lease and as a result I have to prepare the
I'm
unit.
talking about they just left. Their lease is up. Their lease is up. And now between this tenant to the next, this tenant is gone.
Right.
To the next. There's a 2-week period for you to get that apartment together.
Correct.
Whose cost is that?
That's
Yours or to the next tenant?
That's on the landlord. And as a landlord, it's an ideal situation for us to get applicants in the door that we can approve quickly, not be burdened with additional delays from the housing authority because their programs are highly regulated and they require XYZ documentation, and then furthermore inspections, which are delayed because there is a backlog.
But you still have a 2-week
Whatever
lag period in there that you're not going to ever get that money back because
correct,
you were
whatever,
getting the unit together.
correct, whatever the time period is.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative Johnson. Members, any other questions for this? Representative Gates?
Follow. So if someone moves out and they've damaged the apartment, you're not going to show that apartment to anyone
That is correct.
until so this time delay doesn't really start until that apartment is ready to show to someone. Then you have a voucher person is going to take maybe a 30-day process, while someone who's not on a voucher, you may be able to get them in 2 or 3 days.
That is correct.
Yeah, but that time doesn't start until the unit is ready to show.
That is correct. So if my unit is available to show today and I have a voucher recipient that comes in my door, I would gladly accept them, but it could take me 30 days more to occupy the unit because it's going to take time to approve it. If somebody else comes in that is not a voucher holder and has all the documentation ready with them, I have had situations where I have same-day approvals. So yes, definitely there's not an incentive in regards to vacancy loss that will never be recovered to incentivize the landlords to be willing to participate in the program, because we do have to consider that vacancy loss.
Thank you, Representative Gates. Members, any other questions? Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much
That
for your time.
concludes our